Guys, I am not sure. I'm in my office, so it's not a very pretty background, but I'm in my office. I'm not sure if you guys will find me. I had earlier, man, that's kind of close too. Sorry. It's real close. Let me see if I can move back away. Um, ah, okay. No, that's not working either. Oh well. Maybe you guys can find me. So it's, what day is it? It's Tuesday. I'm always like, what day is it when I'm working from home? And it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous day in in our neighborhood. But I wanted to go live today because there's so much happening with these stinking headlines. And so last week I took a lot of time. I'll just be honest, more time than I probably should have. I took a lot of time kind of tracking down information about this erythritol scare. And you guys know what I'm talking about. And I've got, by the way, I've got notes um, on my notebook and on my laptop. So bear with me as I kind of switch back and forth. Hey, good morning, Judy. And I'll be watching comments. So if you guys have questions or whatever, you can holler in. Sorry, and I had to delete a notification. I didn't silence my phone. But I wanted to go live because last week I felt like so much of my life got taken up, not just with the Murdoch trial, I'll be honest, but so much of my life got taken up trying to respond to these headlines that basically said, yeah, we're all going to die. And erythritol is going to be the thing that kills us, and we're going to die. So, what was interesting about last week? And again, I wrote about this on my page. I wrote about this in my private Facebook group. So if you missed that post, it's on there. Go and look at my what I had to say about the erythritol. But what was interesting that happened with the erythritol article, and like I said, I'll touch on that briefly. But it went from there's a link or there's an association to you have double the risk. And so the headline by the end of the week or over the weekend. So the headlines went from something fairly benign and it was out. What was also fascinating to me was the story hit like kind of the lower level, the things with less circulation, the websites and the newspapers or whatever that don't have quite as much of traffic. It went from that to like major media outlet. It's like early in the week, I was getting stuff from like Yahoo News or Google News. By the end of the week, I was getting notifications from the New York Times. And I was like, okay, the New York Times picked this up. Like, really? I was shocked that it was in some of these major outlets. So that was one thing that I kind of noticed. But I also took the time so I I shared with you all that I have a PhD in educational research and policy analysis, right? And so I have an advantage over some people, over like just typical folks, reading these kinds of headlines. And so I tried to break it down in the article and what I wrote last week. I tried to break down with the erythritol going, it's yes, yes. There were increased levels of erythritol in the labs, in the blood work of people who, in the first study, who had cardiovascular disease or who had heart attacks or had diabetes. Yes. What the article didn't go into a lot of detail about, and one of the weaknesses I pointed out last week was that, well, your body makes erythritol, it's endogenous. And so one of the limitations of that study was we don't know how much of the erythritol in the blood was what someone ate, what they ingested, or what was endogenous. So yeah, there's a link. But I think everybody agrees that it's really not conclusive. The other thing they did was they gave healthy people, interestingly, what I understand is they gave 40 healthy people the erythritol in a drink, 30 grams, and they measured a couple different things, but they measured baseline, so before they ingested it and after. And then they took the blood and they did an in vitro analysis, which means that they have the blood in test tubes, and they see how the blood reacts when it's in test tubes. So it's not inside the body. So anyway, and again, we don't know if it was any endogenous erythritol that was being tested, and that's erythritol made by the body, or if it was what was ingested. So that was the other thing that was kind of interesting. The results of those haven't been reviewed. Now, I like to go to people who are smarter than I am. So I'm still talking right now about the erythritol study. I'm going to get to the big headlines from yesterday that keto is going to kill you. But I went to Dr. Peter Peter Attia. I don't know how to say his last name. I've been following him for close to a decade. It's Peter Attia, and his website is Peter Attia MD. He's just like one of the smartest people on the planet. So anyway, so I when I saw that he had written about it on his blog, I wanted to take a chance to look at it. And I was comforted with what he said. He said, same thing that I had said. This study was done before, I think it was concluded in 2017 or 2019, but it was done before erythritol was so ubiquitous. So by that word, that's a fancy word, isn't it? Ubiquitous. Right now, you can find erythritol in a lot of different products, right? It's in keto ice creams and keto chocolates, or products that are marked keto. Erythritol is in a lot of different things. When this observational study, and we'll get back to that in a minute, was being done, erythritol wasn't in so many of the products we see right now. Now, it's an observational study. So what they did, and there's a reason for this, the observational studies usually have a low level of reliability. In fact, a lot of times we'll say, yeah, it's an observational study, doesn't mean a lot, right? So you got to keep that in mind. But what that's about is that they took this cohort of people, 1,000 people, who were older and who had a lot of what we call comorbidities. They had diabetes. They had already had a heart attack. I think 75% of them had high blood pressure. 72% had cardiovascular disease. So they took this population of people who were already at health risk, and they asked them, what are you eating? They asked them if they're eating erythritol. So it could be, so we don't know how much they were ingesting, if any. So actually, they didn't even ask about, I'm sorry, they did not even ask about that, but the food was all self-reported. The other thing that they did was they measured the erythritol that was in the blood. And again, I've already said this, without regard for, was it something that was endogenous? So can we say that increased levels of erythritol are associated with the risk of heart attack and stroke? Yes, we can say that, but we cannot say that it is a cause of heart attack and stroke. So that's huge. Let's think about, I'm looking outside at a beautiful, like 78-degree day in North Carolina, and I know that the geese are coming back, right? And when the geese come back, there's going to be geese poop, right, in the neighborhood. Like we have some ponds, and there's going to be geese poop, and I'm going to have to watch where I'm walking. So, does summertime cause geese poop? No. Geese cause geese poop, but the geese come back because of the warmer weather. So again, that's the difference between there's an association and there's a cause. Yes, in the summertime, we're more likely to step in geese poop, but not because summer caused it. So that's the difference I'm trying to make between causal and association. But Peter Attia, I mentioned him, and he talked about the erythritol levels remain well above ranges for at least a day after consumption, and that suggests that none of them were consuming erythritol in their diet. Okay, I'm sorry. He's talking about the 40 people. The other interesting thing he talked about was, of the 40 healthy people that they gave the sweetener to, there was no evidence whatsoever that the association between circulating erythritol and MACE has anything to do with dietary erythritol intake. Again, it could be the source. The other thing, so there's no causality. We talked about that. Let me get to the next one. Sorry, guys, it's taking me a minute to get to this. Okay. They they did. This was something that they did adjust for known cardiovascular risk factors, age, diabetes, lipid parameters, and smoking status. And when they controlled for that, when they said, okay, yeah, there are high levels of erythritol, but when they controlled for those other cardiovascular risk factors, guess what? The hazard ratios, the chances of it being a problem were not significant. So all of that, the p values went out for and the confidence intervals went down. So anyway, kind of a nothing. Well, I shouldn't say a nothing burger. It's not nothing, but it does demand um, additional investigation. So I think that we put erythritol kind of behind us. And yes, Marcy yes, will be able to replay this. Yes, you'll be able to replay it. It'll stay on my page on Simply Keto, so you can just go back and replay it. Or share it. You can share. Oh, and if anybody hasn't shared this in our big group, please share it in the big Facebook group so people can find me. So that was the whole erythritol thing. I looked at it and I said, am I going to stop feeding this to people I love? Like, am I going to want my husband and my kids to stop using it? And I said, nah, not really. Because I don't need they're consuming copious amounts of it. Am I going to personally stop using it? No, not really, because I don't think there's enough information. If I had other risk factors, if I had a personal history of cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, high, other risk things, then I might take a step back from it. But I want to get into those other risk factors again. Don't let me forget to go back to those other risk factors. So yesterday, I was getting, like, just when I thought we've settled the erythritol thing, there's not enough information, let's move on with our lives. Murdoch trial's over. Let's focus and get some work done. Just when I thought it was safe to go back on the internet, my my feed, my news feed started blowing up with an article that was all over. It was in CNN, Fox News, saying, and the headline was something crazy like, basically, let's see if I can find the headline. Keto's going to kill you. That was kind of the headline. I mean, that wasn't the exact headline, but it was talking about people who are following, and I loved it because the headline was people who follow a keto-like diet or a keto-ish diet are more likely to have heart attacks and stroke. They're going to die. So I started looking at the article, and here's what you need to know. I couldn't find the article. The article isn't out there. So all of those headlines came from there was a professional association conference. Okay, there was a professional association conference, and they did a press release. It's not a peer-reviewed journal article that was released. It was this professional organization who's having a meeting, and they're doing press releases on the presentations that are being heard. Okay, so there's not even a study to dive into to try to dissect. So I had to stick to the article. And so I did read, I read the article on Fox and I read the article on CNN, trying to be fair. Those are the only two that I really had the time. So I have those screenshots in front of me. And basically, what the article is saying is that being on a ketogenic diet can raise your LDL cholesterol, your bad cholesterol. And I think that's also a bit of a misnomer, but let's talk a little bit about that. So with cholesterol, oftentimes our physicians, they do a lipid panel and we get the total cholesterol, right? Well, it's interesting because you need to break down what is in your lipid panel. You want to look at your HDL, you want to look at your triglycerides, and of course, then there's LDL, and of course, then there's total cholesterol. Let's break that down. HDL, which is called the good cholesterol, actually is used as a marker of metabolic syndrome. Now, this isn't something in the US. This is universal. Australia, UK, parts, Europe, that they all use kind of the same 5 factors to diagnose metabolic disease. Metabolic disease is one of those things that puts you at risk of cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, stroke. It affects every system in the body. Well, what are those 5 markers of metabolic disease? One is HDL, good HDL. If your HDL is above a certain level, right, it has to be high to be good. So sometimes what happens when people go on a ketogenic diet, their HDL actually goes up. And that ain't a bad thing, y'all, but it can make the total cholesterol go up. Another thing that's looked at for metabolic syndrome is triglycerides. So your triglycerides are actually associated with blood glucose control or glycemic control, is what your doctor might say. It's how well you manage your blood sugar. That's what's associated with triglycerides. So again, 5 factors of metabolic syndrome are having a good HDL, a high number, higher than most people actually have, having low triglycerides, right? Having not having hypertension, right? Having good blood pressure, abdominal adiposity, which is measured by waist circumference. And I'm going to forget the 5th one. Oh my Lord, y'all. I'm looking at comments. What are they? Hemoglobin A1C. No, I've already said that. Hemoglobin A1C, waist circumference. Notice weight is not in here. HDL, triglycerides. Somebody tell me the 5th. Oh, and blood pressure. We got them. We got them all. And blood pressure. Those are the 5 markers of metabolic syndrome. So what this, and it's not even a study. It's not a study. What these headlines are promoting is a news release where people talked about a study they did, but they did not release methodology and they did not release findings. And it's predicated on the same old that we've been hearing for years. And here's a quote from the article from someone. They had to get someone to comment who was not involved in the study. So this is an observation about an observational study done by people who haven't even released their work and whose work has not been scrutinized by peer review. Interesting, isn't it? But here's the quote from the professional who's not part of the study. Elevated LDL cholesterol should not be dismissed as simply a negligible side effect of VLCD, very low carb diet, or ketogenic diet, pointing to the risk of cardiovascular events in individuals with higher ketone levels in the blood when compared to those on a standard diet. In the study, researchers defined, now this, I love this, you're going to love this too. In the study, researchers defined a low-carb, high-fat diet as 45% of total daily calories coming from fat and 25% coming from carbohydrates. 25% of calories coming from carbohydrates? That, I don't know about you, but I stay usually 5% of my calories from carbohydrates. That's my threshold. I rarely go over that. I might, depending on, again, we're talking about ratios, I might dip into 5, 6, 7%, but I would argue that's 25% of carbs from, or 25% of calories from carbs isn't even a ketogenic diet for Kristie personally. Okay. The next thing I want to point out, and I'm not doing these in order. Hold on, guys. The next thing from the article, this was rich. Okay. They're jumping around. This is during the actual presentation at the conference where they were doing the press release. Quote, our study rationale came from the fact that we would see patients in our cardiovascular prevention clinic with severe hypercholesterolemia following this diet. Guys, this is actually delving into the really soft area of anecdotal evidence. So they based the study, their rationale for doing this was that they were seeing patients in the clinic with severe hypercholesterolemia following this diet. Hypercholesterolemia is high cholesterol. It's that total cholesterol. So again, we don't know the breakdown of HDL, triglycerides, or even LDL. Okay, now it's commonly accepted that high cholesterol can increase risk of cardiovascular disease. It's widely kind of accepted, but is it widely truthful? There's actually conflicting evidence about that. High cholesterol, in and of itself, without other confounding factors, isn't necessarily going to put you at higher risk of cardiovascular disease. But here's the thing, you don't usually see high cholesterol without seeing people who have high hemoglobin A1C, which is poor glycemic control, without centralized adiposity, right? That larger waist circumference, and without high blood pressure, right? That's another huge marker. So it's not just this one thing, but it's the context of all of those other things that also defines your risk. But anyway, this guy goes on to say, or this person goes on to say, this led us to wonder about the relationship between low carb, high fat diets, lipid levels, and cardiovascular disease. And so, despite this, there's limited data on the relationship. So, that's probably the one part of this press release that I could actually agree with, is that we don't know. Moving to the next thing. So this is another interesting, you're going to love it. So the researchers compared, this again, they haven't released the study. It's not been peer reviewed. They are simply doing a press release about the work they've done. The researchers compared the diets of 305 people eating a low carb, high fat diet with 1,200 people eating a standard diet. Now, again, this is self-reported. So they ask people kind of on the street, are you eating a low carb diet? And so the people who were reporting it defined whether they were eating keto or not. I have seen people eating keto with, just so you want to know, with all kinds of like crappy stuff audited. But anyway, and then 1,200 people eating a standard diet. So your ends were not very equal, right? 305 is the number of people who said they self-reported they were eating low carb diet, and 1,200 self-reported they were eating a standard diet. So that's like a 1-to-4 kind of ratio, right? Okay, using that self-reported information, the researchers found that people on the low carb, high fat diet had higher levels of low density lipoprotein, also known as LDL, and ApoB, and that's a protein. So anyway, so let's stop there. I wonder, now they haven't released their study, but and yes, I will. Somebody just asked if I'll link the articles. Absolutely. Happy to link everything that I've read today and yesterday, trying to sort through this. But let's stop right there. What they're reporting on is the higher levels of LDL. Now, we don't know because this, again, has not been peer reviewed and it hasn't been published in a respectable journal, a professional journal. But I wonder if they looked at triglycerides. I wonder if they took the time to look at HDL, or are they only looking at LDL in isolation? Because LDL in isolation, probably not a good indication, right? But I'm guessing I'm guessing they either didn't look at it or they didn't find anything to support their argument because it wasn't reported on. And that's the other kind of, unfortunately, selective information sharing that happens. I want to share what supports my argument and not the things that perhaps weaken my argument. They do go on to say that, and they talk about ApoB, and that is a protein that coats LDL cholesterol and can predict heart disease better than elevated cholesterol. So I do know that if people have high LDL, you can be told to do an ApoB lab. But again, I bet Winston, like I'm going to give you Winston if you can prove me wrong on this. I bet you Winston that people very rarely have problematic APOB labs without having some of those other factors like low HDL, high triglycerides, high blood pressure, poor glycemic control, all of those things. So it's something we should look at, or I should look at, but I would guarantee you that would be about the case. It also talked about, of course, that the low carb, high fat diet researchers' total fat intake was higher. Yeah, that's the definition of the diet. And they poke fun of, or they didn't poke fun of, but they point out they had double the consumption of animal sources compared to those in the control group. And again, they do not mention with the control group those other markers of cholesterol, the ones that are important enough to be considered part of the 5 factors of metabolic syndrome. Interesting, eh? Okay, so that was the article. That was the big hype over the article. And again, I can't be clear enough about this. Those headlines that we were seeing that started yesterday, that keto, if you're on keto, you're going to die. Well, guess what? If you're not on keto, you're going to die. None of us get out of here alive. So let's be real clear about that. But this press release on this study that has not been through a peer review process, has not been published in a scientific journal. That's what the headlines are about. And their assertion, their headline that says you're going to die is based on one factor. It's based on people having higher LDL. It's based on the 300 people who reported that they had followed a ketogenic diet having higher LDL. So let's take a big step back. Big step back. In all of these cases, so we're talking about 2 different things. We're talking about the article about erythritol, right? And we're talking about these new headlines from yesterday that the keto-like diet is going to kill you. All of these things, again, aren't taking into effect that a lot of us who want to follow low carb, high fat, who we use the erythritol, we're doing it to become healthier and to lose weight. We actually have doctors now who are recommending low carb or keto for people who have diabetes and who are at greater risk of cardiovascular disease. So it's like saying that, I'm trying to think of a really good example. The only one I can think of, y'all may not love, but it's like saying that, I'm trying to think of, I'm thinking something not gender specific. Kristie, think of a better example. Um, well, it's like saying that people who wear glasses are less likely to be able to see. Well, yeah, you're wearing the glasses because you have vision problems, right? And the same kind of thing, you're using the erythritol or you're using a ketogenic diet because you have typically because you have health issues that you want to control or you want to avoid health issues. So I'm going to try and look at comments. If you have questions or comments, I am trying to watch this. I'm going to grab some water before I go to the next thing. Okay. What else? Oh, the other thing that I have to say, so there was a headline today, actually. So just when I thought we were dealing with the erythritol headlines, and then we had the keto's going to kill you headlines, and then today I got a notification in my news feed from a media outlet that said stevia and monk fruit are associated with greater increased risk of cardiovascular disease. And I was like, wait. Last week, everybody was saying, erythritol is bad. And they were saying, and people were actually recommending try stevia and try monk fruit. And this week, they're telling me that ain't even safe. So I, of course, clicked through because I wanted to see what that was about. And I kid you not, and I can share that. I think I still have that one on my phone. I kid you not, when you dive into the headline, it wasn't based on any research that showed that stevia or monk fruit were problematic. It was based on stevia and monk fruit are problematic because they're often combined with erythritol. So they're going back to the erythritol studies to increase that association. Oh, well, wait a minute. We haven't done any research. Nobody's done any studies. In fact, all the studies that have been done show it to be safe. Now, do we need more research? Are there limitations that maybe there hasn't been enough? Yeah, probably so. One could argue for that. They're grass, generally recognized as safe by the Food and Drug Administration. Okay, fine. Or the USDA, sorry. But anyway, so, okay, fine. But what they're doing is they're extrapolating that and saying, those aren't safe because they're mixed with erythritol. They're not saying that those aren't safe on their own by themselves, but only because they're mixed. It's kind of, it's a stretch. So I started thinking about this kind of long and hard. I mean, it's like my time last week was like, cut short doing the things I'd planned to do because I was working on trying to sort out this erythritol, diving through, reading everything I could. And I've got, let's go back to that too. But anyway, reading through, doing everything I could. And then this week, those headlines were pounding again. And I was getting private messages, lots of group Facebook posts, group questions about this. And so I sat there and I went, last week they wanted, the media was promoting these headlines then on erythritol. Now they're saying keto diet is going to kill you based on LDL. And then they've got these headlines for stevia and monk fruit. Like, what is going on? And I said in the Facebook group, I said, I feel a little under attack. But here's the thing that I know. Having worked in social media, I mean, let's be honest, this is my job, right, y'all? Having worked in social media, not just for what I do for me, but what I've done for other people, here is what I know to be true. Whether you are Fox News or CNN or the New York Times, you need clicks and likes and shares. You do. People know that there are certain topics, there are certain things that are going to get shared more. If you put a cute photo, if you put an intriguing photo, if you put a really sexy food photo, talking about sexy food photo, get your mind out of the gutter. If you put an attention-grabbing photo, you're going to get more reviews. You're going to get more likes. You're going to get more interactions. You're going to get more shares. It is exactly what a lot of people do for a living. Now, why would CNN and Fox Network and all these other people, why would they need more views? Ha! They need more views because they get advertising dollars. They get advertising dollars. There are people who do what I do, and this is not a criticism. Let me be very clear. This is not, everybody makes a living, right? Everybody got to pay the egg bill, right? Everybody has to make a living. But here's the truth. I have no ads on my website, none, because I don't like having to play that game. But this is what I know. If I have 10,000 views a day, which that's not much. If I had 10,000 views a day on my webpage, and let's be real clear, I don't even know what I have because I don't take the time to pay attention to the metrics, then I can ask for X dollars to put ads on my site, okay? If I have 1,000,000 views a day, I can ask for X more dollars to put on my site. Same thing is true for media outlets. If CNN gets more traffic, they can charge more for their ad revenues, whether it's Nike or Procter and Gamble or whomever, they can charge more. So their job, any anybody in the media. I don't care what website you're talking about. Healthline. I love Healthline. I think Healthline has great information, but do they have ads? Yes. And there was a headline again that came across this morning. I'm gonna have to disable my news notifications, but there was a headline that came across this morning that said, "What are the best protein powders?" And I was like, "Oh, this is interesting." And I clicked through, and I spent the time. And as I'm reading about how they tried to decide what were the best protein powders, as I read through that, I saw ads for protein powders. And I scrolled to the bottom of the page because here's the other thing. We're required to disclose if there is any kind of sponsorship or affiliation. So if you get affiliate money for recommending something, you have to disclose that. So I scrolled to the bottom of the page, and guess what? Those were affiliate links. Yeah. So here you had it. I won't tell it, but it is so common. It's so common. But if you look through it and somebody's saying, here are the top 5 protein powders, they're getting paid if you click through and buy those. Now, it doesn't cost you more, it's advertising dollars, and there's nothing sinister about it, but you have to keep that in mind. Here's Kristie's theory about what happened last week. Remember how I told you in the beginning, lower level media outlets picked up the erythritol story, and it got a lot of traffic, got a lot of traction. Okay. They picked it up, and other people saw what was trending because there are people, it is their job to track SEO, search engine optimization, and they look for what's trending. And then their website or their entity will put out content related to what's trending. Because remember, they need traffic. They need traffic so they can charge more money for their advertising dollars, even if it's free for you. And again, this doesn't negate the free resources that are out there, doesn't negate it at all. But what you need to understand is that is part of the traffic. So I guarantee you that some of the drama, some of what we're seeing repeated this week, is also predicated on, we ran that story about erythritol and we got increased views. What else can we run? And they decided to go with this press release about keto. And now they're saying, well, let's stevia and monk fruit are often mixed with erythritol. So let's do a headline about stevia and monk fruit, because those words came up a lot because people last week immediately started looking for alternatives to erythritol. So I guarantee that that was absolutely part of it. Anyway, last thing I want to leave you with, and you guys have been so patient. I've been talking. I don't usually go live this long. I don't know what's wrong with me. This is just, I get something on my heart, I guess, that just really bugs me. But here is a bit of irony. Oh, I've got 2 things. Sorry, I said last. 2 things. The folks who eat sugar, like the people who eat a standard American diet with lots of sugar, are not all at a lower risk. If you took a similar study, so let's say we did parallel studies, and we said these people have high blood pressure, 75% of them. These people have had cardiovascular disease. These people previously had a heart attack. These people have poor glycemic control. These people have, low HDL and high triglycerides, and they eat erythritol. And we take the same cohort of people, right, who have cardiovascular disease and all the things I mentioned, and they eat sugar. And we try to extrapolate that and say, what's the risk of stroke or heart attack? I don't think you're going to see anything significantly different. And that's Kristie's opinion. But I'd love to see somebody do that. You don't see that kind of study. You don't see that kind of information being investigated. And I think that's really important. Now, here's my last, and I'm going to shut up after this, I promise. So for nearly a decade. And I'm being very, very honest here. For nearly a decade, I had, or when I started keto, I started in June 2013. I was losing weight. I felt amazing. My energy went up. I was able to go off the pain medications that I was on for my back. And I went to my doctor. I think it was July or August. I started at the end of June. I think it was August when I went to see my general physicians, and I said, "Hey, I'm losing weight." He was thrilled with my weight loss. "I'm losing weight, but I'm doing this low carb, high fat." And I was eating bacon. I was eating all the things that people told you would increase your risk of cardiovascular disease. And I was like, if I'm wrong about this, like I know I'm losing weight, but if I'm wrong about this, like I don't want to die of a heart attack. And that was my very transparent conversation with my doctor. Can you do labs? Can you see how I'm doing? And he did my labs, and he said, "Kristie, everything looks good. I do not think that you're at increased risk for cardiovascular disease. We're going to continue to monitor you." Now, that is in the beginning. That was when I was just like anybody else who had no background and really didn't know. But yes, I was legitimately concerned about my increase in cardiovascular disease. What happened in the almost 10 years is that everything that everything that happened with me and with my labs improved. They actually got better. So that's my tenure kind of, and my husband too. The same thing for my husband. All of his risk factors, except for his blood pressure, and I have a different theory about that. Well, that's David for another day. But um, I went to, given this news, given this headline last week, I did something similar to what I did back in 2013 with my general physician. I went to her and said, "Okay, there's this headline about erythritol. I don't think it's a problem, but I have a history of stroke in my family and cardiovascular disease. All four grandparents and great grandparents, some of the great grandparents had stroke, heart attacks, to died of heart disease. My dad has heart disease. My mom has diabetes. I am at high risk here. What can I do to assess my own risk?" And I'm aware of the lifestyle factors. And on all of those, I'm check. My lipids are great. My HDL is good. My triglycerides are low. Hemoglobin A1C is fantastic. My blood pressure is like textbook. All of those things are fine, but there's this family history. What can we look at? We've already taken out what people call the lifestyle diseases, and we know that my risk is low. Are there labs that we can assess? And the reason I wanted to do this, I'm going to back up a little further. If somebody comes to me now and says, "Kristie, I'm worried about cholesterol, what should I do?" Or "My LDL is high," I'm not going to tell that person, "You don't need to worry about it," because I'm not a medical professional. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell that person, look at these resources, right? And what we often tell people is, if you're worried about your risk of heart attack or cardiovascular disease, have a calcium artery score, a CAC. Go to your doctor, they'll do the scan, and they'll give you a number that tells you your risk factor. David actually did that after he went with me to a low carb conference and came back, and he's like, "I'm going to ask my doctor for a calc score." And I was like, "You should." And he did, and he went zero. It was zero, which is like very, very low risk. Now, can he die of a heart attack? Well, sure he can, but his risk is very, very low. Even after at that time, he had probably been eating a ketogenic diet for at least 7 years at that point, or maybe 6. Anyway, I wanted to be able to give you guys, the reason I went down that rabbit trail was I wanted to be able to say to you guys, look, I'm not worried about consuming erythritol based on what I've read. If you're worried, I respect that. And don't just take the word for this not very well done observational study. Work with your personal physician who knows your health history. Look at that and do this other lab. So, while it is not a perfect measure, working with actually 2 different doctors, um, there is something called a PTIRNA, and I'm going to say it wrong because I'm going to look it up because I get my I and my R and my N screwed up. I know, it's lost my heart. Um, but it ain't perfect. And that's part of the interesting thing. There, there are not great biomarkers for people who are at the risk of stroke, which is thrombosis, blood clots, which is what that study actually was trying to figure out, right? But one thing that can be looked at is PT, I think PTIRN. Dang it, I'm looking at D-dimer, but that's not a good one. Kristie, I lost my place. Uh, Sorry, guys. Yeah, PTIRN, and is the lab, and my doctor has ordered that for me, and I'm just trying. It's either PTIRN or PTR. Yeah, no, that's giving me Scrabble. I don't want to tell you this wrong, and I can link to it, but I've been reading about it. PTINR. I told you I say it wrong. Yes, Judy. PTINR. Y'all were like, Kristie. Yeah. PTINR. I got IRN and I can't get that out of my brain. PTINR. Now, here's the thing about it. PTIRN is PTN and INR. PTINR is used primarily to evaluate people who are on blood thinners. So if you're taking Coumadin or warfarin or something like that, or if you have some kind of clotting disorder, your physician might order a PTINR lab to see if you will bleed too much, right? Which is a risk if you're going to have surgery. Um, so PTIRN gives you clotting. Now, here's the thing. PT is I can't even say it. PT measures how long it takes for a clot to form in a blood sample. The INR is an international normalized ratio, and it's a calculation based on those PT results. So here's the thing. If it's low, and I mean low, usually under 2.0 is the metric, like 1.5 or 1, then you could, it's not an exclusive kind of diagnosis, but you could be at higher risk for blood clots, and you might want to work with your physician to determine if you need to be on some kind of blood thinner or anticoagulant. Again, work with your doctor on that. But if you're at all concerned about the recent headlines about erythritol, talk to your doctor, see if you can get a PTINR test. You can, I think, get it yourself. There's like different kinds of online testing. I don't get paid for any of that. That's not why I'm even mentioning it. But it's just a blood draw and it doesn't take very long at all. They can do it. I mean, I think you get the results almost like when you're right there. It was ordered for me. I have not gone to do it yet. I'm going to go and do it. But yeah, if you're if you are at all concerned, just like I would tell you to get a calc score for cholesterol, I will tell you to get a PTINR. Now, I'm going to write a follow-up post about this, but there's so much to unpack. I mean, I've been talking for 50 minutes, almost an hour. There's so much to unpack about this, but I wanted to make sure I mentioned that because I do think that those headlines are scary. I do think those headlines are to get more traffic, to get more dollars. So I told you in the beginning, my PhD is in research, education research and policy analysis. The first rule of policy analysis, always, 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 the first rule is to follow the money. And I've mentioned the Alec Murdoch trial in here a couple of different times because that was also in the headlines last week. And that, of course, was a case of certainly follow the money. So anyway, I hope that some of that is helpful to you. Again, I'm not saying that you should not be concerned about high LDL. I'm not telling you that it's absolutely safe to use erythritol or any of those other things. I'm telling you that based on the deadlines, based on the headlines, based on everything that I've read, digging deeper into the research, I'm not overly concerned. Will I be going to the lab to get my PTINR? Yes, I will. go to the lab to get my PT INR. And then I'll come back and I'll be able to share, hopefully, good results with the rest of you guys. Anyway, I hope you have a fabulous day. If you've enjoyed the live, let me know. I mean, seriously, there are days that I'm like, I should do a live about this. And they're like, people, nobody wants to look at you, girl. Nobody wants to come hang out and spend time with you. So let me know, because I do go back and forth about whether or not I should do these live sessions. I do the live cooking classes in my cooking community, but this is a little different. But anyway, maybe it's going to become a thing again if you guys are at all interested in it. But I will tell you, it just hurts my heart because I see people freaking out and kind of giving up. And I don't know about you guys, but I know what my life was like before I went keto or low carb. I know that I was getting back 272 pounds. I know that I was on pain medications and I was out of breath walking and I was in constant pain with my back. I know that I was probably headed toward a diabetes diagnosis. So I don't think my life would be at all what it is today if I wasn't doing this. So to give up keto or to give up erythritol based on these absolutely sensationalistic, and I'm going to go ahead and say irresponsible headlines, because I do believe they're absolutely irresponsible. And I do believe they're to drive traffic to sites. I then I think I would be in much worse shape than I am right now. And again, we're all going to die. Nobody gets out of here alive. We're all going to die. So I'm going to die with probably, I don't know, steak and shrimp and bacon and I don't know, in my hands. Anyway, hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye.